Since its release, hypercharges have been one of the most recognizable yet controversial features in Brawl Stars. Many people love them, saying that the gameplay has become much more exciting as a result, while many others hate them, saying that the balancing of brawlers has taken a huge hit since the release of hypercharges. Which is right. In this video, I aim to take a look at that and more of the pros and cons involved with hypercharges, and come up with the conclusion on whether hypercharges were truly a good addition to the game or not. I've noticed a lot of you guys who watch my videos aren't subscribed, so if you watch these videos, consider subscribing. Second, join our Discord server. We have some fun stuff to do there, like our very own 1v1 ranked called Gauntlet, where you can win Feral Ollie. Finally, consider becoming a channel member if you're interested in supporting out the channel and have ample disposable income for some cool perks. Before we start, let's talk very briefly about hypercharges themselves, so that you can get all, or at least most of the facts, because there's literally no way I didn't miss something. Hypercharges are basically supers on steroids, charging the same way as a super and giving extra features when using the super, along with stat buffs. As for the rollout, each update with the exception of the last one introduces 6 new hypercharges. Hypercharges are obtained mainly in 4 ways: from legendary star drops, for 79 gems when the hypercharge just dropped, for 5,000 coins after the hypercharge has been dropped for a while, and finally from hypercharge star drops whenever they pop up. With that out of the way, let's get to talking about the pros and cons, starting off with the hypercharge propaganda. One of the main reasons that hypercharges were a great addition to the game to many people were that it made gameplay more exciting and fresh. But is this true? I would definitely agree. While I'm sure a lot of you guys, and sometimes myself, would love to go back to the pre-hypercharge days, the game was starting to get stale by that point. There hadn't been a big mechanic that affected gameplay since Gears, and we all know how that went. Hypercharges offered a big shakeup to the gameplay we had gotten used to, and made gameplay feel much more exciting than it used to, with the game-changing ability to make crazy plays at our hands that previously was not there. And this segues into my next pro, which is that hypercharges feel satisfying to use. I mean, come on, who doesn't love the feeling of a hypercharged team wipe with Fang, destroying the safe with Colette or Crow, breaking up the map with Frank, or speeding around the enemies with Stu? These moments feel special to us when we use it, and the feeling of saving up your hypercharge for a while and actually getting value out of it when you use it is an unmatched feeling. Next, hypercharges made good gameplay feel more rewarding. Basically, anyone with a brain could charge up a super, but that really isn't the same for the most part with hypercharges, and I'm looking at you, Edgar Randoms, for that most. Since hypercharges took a lot more supercharge than the regular super, this accomplished 2 things. It made sure to punish you for inefficient and poor gameplay, as you wouldn't be able to charge up your hypercharge, and it made sure to reward you for efficient and good gameplay, giving you a game-changing ability. However, I do concede that this is a bit inaccurate for brawlers with automatic supercharge or relatively faster hypercharge charge rates. Diving deeper into this point, let's now go to our next pro, which is that hypercharges allow for a larger reward for hitting shots after already charging up your super. To put this into context, let's talk about an example of this. Let's say you're playing Piper before the hypercharge update against an El Primo. You're on peak form, hitting every shot on the Primo and charge up your super. But there's a slight problem. Each time you hit a shot, the Primo just hides behind a wall and you can't really do anything until he pops back out again. You're not gaining any supercharge from this, and in fact, the Primo is the one gaining supercharge with his tank trait. Even though you're playing great and hitting your shots, you're not getting rewarded since you already have your super, and using your super to break the walls means getting into dangerous territory and removes your tool for escape. But with the hypercharge update, this no longer happens. You can now continue to be rewarded for hitting shots after getting your super, charging up your hypercharge, and punishing the El Primo for being an annoying wall camper once you use your hypercharge. Obviously, this is just one example and applies to a lot of other brawlers, especially those who don't use their supers often. The next pro is that hypercharges made it so that the game was never over for your team. Let's say, for example, your opponents have 10 gems and are in their own spawn, but you have super with Crow. Before the hypercharge update, if you super in, you're going to get shredded, and 10 edits and 200 posts will be made calling you bad random. This means that, well, the game is over, and there's basically no point in even trying. However, this changed with hypercharges. Now, let's say you have a hypercharged Crow, and suddenly, you guys now have a chance. You can definitely get the kill on the gem carrier, and maybe even the whole team if you get help from your teammates. Obviously, this won't always happen, but the possibility of it actually happening is enough to give you hope, and let you keep fighting on, as you never know what will happen with the well-timed hypercharge. Next, hypercharges created more hype and discussion around the game. Hypercharge concepts are very popular, and people are very passionate about making/discussing them. Also, as we all know too well, hypercharge leaks have become a large talking point in the community and create a lot of hype. Brawlers like Lola, Meg, and Bo have had their hypercharges revealed beforehand, creating a lot of hype and concepts for what the hypercharge could be, how it could shake up the meta, and when it would release. Hypercharges also made less popular brawlers much more popular if they had especially good hypercharges. Let's take a look at one especially good example of this, with Mandy. Mandy used to be one of the more overshadowed snipers, behind brawlers like Brock and Piper, never being picked as much of them and generally was unpopular. However, this all changed with her hypercharge. Not only was it a great hypercharge, but it was also an extremely fun hypercharge to work with, as you could potentially team wipe the enemy with it, or at the very least, deal a whole lot of damage. With this hypercharge, Mandy is the 5th most played brawler in the game, even above Piper. The final pro, and the end of the hypercharge propaganda, is that hypercharges gave actual use to our gems, and were relatively cheap to buy. To put context to this, roughly around the time hypercharges dropped, brawl passes became purely pay to get, and no longer could be bought with gems. This is a whole video in itself, but this basically made gems almost useless, other than the occasional special offer or mythic/legendary skins. However, hypercharges became available to buy for gems, giving actual progression use to people who were now saving up gems and had nothing to spend them on. Furthermore, the 79 gem prices often meant you could buy more than one hypercharge, and were a great help for our progression. And finally, that's it for the pros. Now I switch up and start bashing on hypercharges. This will be very easy now that Chester and Sam's hypercharges have released. For the first con, to absolutely no one's surprise, it's just that it makes brawlers who get the hypercharge in the update broken, and centers the meta around them. This was a huge issue back in the day, but isn't as prevalent now, but I'm still gonna talk about it. When the first batch of hypercharges released, every single one of the new hypercharged brawlers shot straight up to the S tier or the A tier, despite however weak they were before the hypercharge. This obviously did not lead to a healthy meta, and led to the meta being based around a few brawlers for quite a few seasons. And even to this day, as even though most brawlers in the game have their hypercharges, the new hypercharged brawlers still shoot up to the top of the meta, like Mr. P, Hank, Chester, and Sam. This connects somewhat to my next con, which is that it turned most brawlers without hypercharges into fodder. This has become more prevalent as time has gone on, as less and less brawlers are without hypercharges. Brawlers like Bonnie, Doug, and Pam have sunk down the meta due to not being able to compete with the new hypercharged brawlers. And at this point, their only hope is, ironically, to get a hypercharge to compete with the new meta. And to wrap up this whole point with another con, hypercharges just cause too much power creep and damage inflation. Brawlers who did have a hypercharge were inherently stronger than those without, as on top of the new mechanics, they had stat buffs that the non-hypercharged brawlers just could not compete with. This caused a lot of damage inflation, with hypercharged brawlers being able to deal more and more damage, as new hypercharges had to be stronger than the old ones, and so on and so forth. leading to a never-ending cycle of more and more damage, while the brawlers without a hypercharge are left to suffer. This extends to game modes as well, as the heist game mode has been power crept like crazy due to hypercharges, and we are seeing games end faster and faster. If you're interested in this topic, I highly recommend watching my video on the downfall of heist for a more detailed explanation after finishing this video. Next, some hypercharges are either just too broken or too weak in their design. Let's take for example Stu. Even with nerfing stats, it's very unlikely that Stu's hypercharge will ever be considered a bad one, as it's just too powerful in its very design, as it allows Stu basically infinite heals, allows him to get anywhere on the map, and allows him to dodge basically every shot. Compare this to someone like Pearl, whose hypercharge is very mediocre in design. Her super's point is pushing enemies away, and her hypercharge punishes people who stay close to her. But it's already pushed enemies back with the super, so it's literally almost useless. And since Brawl Stars has said that they won't think about reworking hypercharges until all hypercharges are released, this disparity in design will continue for a while, as Pearl suffers with a horrendous hypercharge while Stu is chilling with his great hypercharge. Next is a con, which is the other side to an earlier pro, which is that hypercharges allow your opponents to make a comeback even if you're about to win the game. Let's take this scenario from earlier, but from the other perspective. You've dominated the entire game, you're playing great, and your opponents have been getting cooked the entire game, and now you're sitting with 10 gems, about to win. And suddenly, a hypercharged crow comes from literally nowhere and kills you, and your teammates are picked off by the enemies. One single hypercharge was enough to change the tide of the entire game, and gave the win to a team that definitely did not deserve it. And somewhat connecting to that, my next con is that hypercharges have made it feel like there's a little bit less skill involved with the game. Let's take team wiping with Mortis for example. Without the hypercharge, team wiping with Mortis took actual skill and timing. And more often than not, he would probably die in the process if the person playing with him didn't have enough skill. Now, however, pop a hypercharge and you'll get a team wipe served to you on a silver platter. Obviously that's an exaggeration, but you get the point. It's much easier to get a team wipe now than before. Therefore, there's just less skill involved. And this is just one facet, as hypercharges like Rico's make it so that you are basically guaranteed to hit shots with no extra skill involved. Hypercharges like Terra make the super literally impossible to miss, and hypercharges like Buzz let you get a successful stun on the enemy with basically no way to miss. These are game-changing abilities that can be activated with just the touch of a button, and some of them like Edgar or Buzz can be charged up without even dealing damage to the enemy, letting them get free kills once the hypercharge is charged up, despite doing literally nothing to deserve it. I can go on and on, but you get the point. Hypercharges are definitely not very skilled to use or even obtain in some cases. The next con is that it made already annoying brawlers even more annoying to deal with. For example, Mr. P, despite being out of the meta for a while, was considered an extremely annoying brawler due to his pets. And the only thing that made him even tolerable to face was that he was extremely power creeped by hypercharges. And then he got one. And it's absolutely horrible to face against, as his porters have become unreasonably powerful, making him an insta-ban in ranked. Another example is Fang, who before his hypercharge was always annoying to face off, as he would get the most annoying team wipes or super chains, killing you when you're not even near him. And with his hypercharge, it got even worse. He became much more likely to complete the team wipe, and he could go through walls, making facing him, especially when his hyper was broken, feel horrible. To end off this video, let's talk about the coin shortage that hypercharges have caused. With the removal of Club League, the coin shortage was already starting to come into effect, but we couldn't see the full consequences. And then hypercharges dropped, and there was no permanent new way to get coins. As you can guess, this caused coins to go into a shortage. Suddenly, maxing out a brawler fully cost 5,000 more coins, and coins were not easy to obtain at all. And since hypercharges were such an important part of a brawler's kit, not having it is basically not an option if you wanted to play competitively. In layman's terms, this means there's a high demand for coins and a low supply, which is never a good thing. Overall, adding a new and extremely powerful feature for 5,000 coins without giving a real method to obtain those 5,000 coins consistently is a recipe for disaster, and it's a huge reason why we're in the Great Coin Depression right now. So overall, were hypercharges a good addition to this game? Like most questions of this magnitude, I think this is a complicated question to answer, but I think I've said enough information to make a conclusion. And that conclusion is that hypercharges are a necessary evil for the game. A lot of the pros were a bit flimsy and didn't hit as hard as the cons. Hypercharges ruining the balancing of the game, beginning an arms race, reducing the skill required in the game, and worsening the coin shortage are all very damning reasonings to why hypercharges were a bad addition to the game. So why did I say they were a necessary evil? It's because sooner or later, hypercharges or something like them would be essential for keeping the game alive. No matter how good they could make the progression, if the core gameplay is basically the same for years, it's obvious it will get stale. This is why hypercharges had to be added in order to shake up gameplay and make it more exciting to keep the game alive. Could it have been done better? 100%. Hypercharges could have cost less coins or even be bought for power points. Supercell could have tested out the hypercharges a lot more in order to make sure they were balanced and not completely broken or horrendous. Another controversial thing they could have done was to be adding all the hypercharges at once. This would solve a lot of the problems like the brawlers without hypercharges being forgotten, but also create a lot of new ones like overloading the player base and probably the servers and cause a lot of balancing issues. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think should have been done to make hypercharges better, or scrap hypercharges entirely and make something new to replace them. But anyway, thanks for watching. Watch this video, or this playlist, or join the Discord server.